In the dim light of her quarters aboard the Asinus, Captain Alina Day felt an inexplicable change deep within her. As a high-ranking commander of the ZYTH Collective, a species known for their unyielding focus on logic and order, her body had been engineered for resilience, stability, and predictability. Yet tonight she felt an unfamiliar warmth coursing through her veins, a rhythm unsettlingly out of sync with her species' nature. It had been only days since her mission to Earth had concluded, an assignment that had been unprecedented in its scope. She had spent a week observing human culture and their emotional interactions. Humans, chaotic emotional creatures, were considered unworthy of study by ZYTH leaders. Yet something about Earth had piqued their curiosity, and Alina had been chosen as the collective's observer. Her mission, while uneventful, ended with a chance meeting that refused to leave her mind. Dr. Ethan Voss, a human scientist whose passion for his work radiated with such intensity that it fascinated her. It was during their brief conversations that Alina had felt something she couldn't quite name, a spark, a connection. Now, back in the sterile confines of her ship, that memory lingered with a strange insistence. Alina leaned over the bio panel, examining the data from her routine post-mission checkup. Her readings should have been flawless, as they always were. But the display told a different story. Her cellular structure was fluctuating. The monitor blinked red with a warning she had never seen before. Unidentified genetic variants detected. Her heart raced, a response she had trained herself to suppress. She immediately encrypted the data before the central database could flag it. "Impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible. ZYTH physiology was designed to be immutable. Their genetic code was impervious to external influences, or so she had been taught. Yet here she was, her body betraying the principles her society had built its superiority upon. A sharp chime of an incoming transmission broke her focus. "Captain DA, anomalies have been detected in your post-mission bioreport. Report to the Collective Central Research Hub immediately for a full analysis," the voice of Admiral Ryland commanded, cold and unwavering. Her pulse quickened. Alina knew exactly what that meant. The Collective had no tolerance for anomalies. Any deviation, no matter how small, was treated with absolute severity. She quickly masked her growing unease, replying, "Yes, Admiral." The transmission ended, leaving her in a silence heavier than before. Alina stared at her reflection in the polished surface of the bio panel. Her once flawless, pale silver skin shimmered faintly with a golden hue. Her mind raced with questions. Could it be connected to Earth? To Ethan? To that one night where her curiosity had led her to explore more than the mere mechanics of human behavior? A single thought gripped her mind: I must find answers before they do. Alina knew that the collective scrutiny would not wait. She had mere hours to act before her ship's systems reported her non-compliance. Her fingers flew across the console as she initiated a sequence to override the central surveillance systems, an act punishable by exile if discovered. The data flooding her screen revealed a truth she was not prepared for. Her genetic markers had been altered, infused with sequences that did not originate from the ZYTH genome. More shocking still, traces of human DNA were present. The discovery sent a chill through her. How could this have happened? Her encounter with Ethan had been brief, no more than a few hours spent discussing their respective species' physiological advancements. There had been a spark, yes, but nothing that could justify this. She had been cautious, logical. She had never allowed herself to be affected by emotion. Yet here she was, facing a reality she couldn't explain. The intercom buzzed, breaking her concentration. It was Lieutenant Kel Turan, her most trusted officer. His voice was low and urgent. "Captain, the collective has flagged your biodata. They're dispatching enforcers to detain you. Whatever you found, you need to act quickly." Alina's pulse quickened. "Kale, something's happening to me. My genetic code, it's changing. And I believe it's tied to the humans." There was a pause on the line before Kel responded, his tone thick with concern. "If they find out, they'll label you compromised. You know what that means?" Alina's stomach tightened. The weight of his words was undeniable. Declaring a ZYTH as compromised was tantamount to a death sentence. The individual would be erased from all records. Their existence would be nullified, a fate worse than death for a species that valued their legacy and continuity above all else. "I can't let them take me, Kel. Not before I understand what's happening," Alina replied, her voice steady but laced with desperation. Kel's voice softened, though there was still a hint of fear. "Then you need to move quickly. I'll assist you where I can, but you have to trust no one. The enforcers are coming and they'll search the ship." Alina's thoughts raced. Her body was changing, in ways that defied everything she knew about herself. Every fiber of her being screamed to resist, to seek out answers. But she had learned, over years of training, that resistance without understanding was futile. Her hand hovered over the console, her decision pressing upon her like an unbearable weight. She had to go deeper into this mystery, but she had to do it alone. If the collective learned the truth, it would destroy everything, her career, her identity, everything she had ever worked for. But what if this change was not a threat, but a new path forward? A path that might offer a deeper understanding of herself, and the strange connection she had felt to Ethan? Her breath steadied as she initiated the final sequence on the console, preparing to erase all traces of her unauthorized actions. Whatever lay ahead, she knew one thing. This would be the most important decision of her life. Aina stood at the precipice of an unimaginable choice. The ZYTH Collective, the very foundation of her existence, demanded unwavering loyalty and adherence to their strict logic. Yet, the alternative was to accept the fundamental change happening within her, a change tied to humanity and, more specifically, to one human, Dr. Ethan Voss. The thought of defying the collective was unthinkable, but Aina knew that accepting her transformation without answers would be even more unbearable. "There's only one option," she whispered to herself. "I must leave ZYTH space and return to Earth. If anyone has answers, it's him." Aina hesitated for only a moment before turning to her trusted officer, Lieutenant Kel Turan. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on her, but she knew she couldn't carry the burden alone. She needed help. "Will you help me?" she asked, her voice tinged with a mixture of desperation and resolve. Kel's loyalty to her had always been unshakable. Without hesitation he replied, "I'll erase the logs and create a false trail. You must leave now." Aina nodded in gratitude, knowing the risk Kel was taking on her behalf. With a final glance at her quarters, she terminated the call and set the coordinates for Earth. As the ship's engines roared to life, a blend of fear and determination coursed through her. She was leaving behind everything she had ever known, the strict order of ZYTH space, the collective ideal she had been raised to follow. Her reflection in the viewport stared back at her, golden hues faintly glowing in her eyes. Whatever was happening to her, it wasn't just a genetic anomaly. It was something deeper, something that connected her to the very essence of humanity. She was determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant defying the collective and risking everything she held dear. The journey to Earth was fraught with tension. Aina's ship, sleek and advanced, was not designed for stealth. The ZYTH Collective would undoubtedly track her, but with Kel's clever manipulation of the ship's logs, she hoped to gain precious hours, time she desperately needed. As she neared Earth's orbit, the planet's vibrant colors filled her viewport, swirling blues, greens and whites, alive with motion. It was a stark contrast to the cold, metallic hues of ZYTH space. Aina felt a peculiar pang in her chest. Was it apprehension or something more profound? Her scan soon picked up Ethan's location, a small coastal town nestled against rolling hills and shimmering waves. The coordinates led to a modest structure surrounded by what humans called gardens, life thriving in an organic and untamed way. Aina's heart fluttered at the thought of seeing him again, though she quickly tempered the emotion. She had a mission to complete and nothing could get in the way of that. Carefully, Aina's ship descended, cloaking itself from human radar systems. It landed in a dense forest on the town's outskirts, shielded by towering trees and thick foliage. The quiet hum of her engines faded as the ship settled into place, and Aina was enveloped by Earth's sounds. Birds chirped in a melodic rhythm, and the wind rustled through the leaves like whispers in the dark. Stepping out of her ship, Aina took a deep breath, allowing the planet's air to fill her lungs. It was rich, full of scents that overwhelmed her senses. She had prepared for this moment, studied Earth's biosphere in detail, but the raw vibrancy of the planet was something no briefing could convey. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced. Her movements were fluid and deliberate as she made her way through the forest, avoiding detection. Her ZYTH physiology allowed her to navigate the terrain with ease, though she remained cautious. The last thing she needed was to draw attention. As she neared the edge of the woods, the structure came into view. Lights glowed warmly through the windows, and the faint sound of human music reached her ears, a rhythm that felt strangely soothing. With a deep breath, Aina approached the door. Her heart beat faster, and her mind raced with questions. What would Ethan say? Would he even remember her? Would he believe her? Before she could second-guess herself, the door creaked open. Ethan stood there, his eyes widening in shock. He was taller than she remembered, his frame solid but unassuming. His dark hair was tousled, and his expression shifted quickly from surprise to recognition. "Aina?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within her. "I need your help, Ethan." Without hesitation, Ethan stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Inside, the room was warm, filled with earthy scents. Books lined the walls and small devices emitted a soft hum. Aina's gaze swept across the space, noting its simplicity yet undeniable charm. There was an air of warmth here that she hadn't expected. It was human, organic. Ethan closed the door behind her and turned to face her, his expression still one of surprise. "What's going on?" he asked. "I never thought I'd see you again, let alone here on Earth." Aina met his gaze, her golden eyes reflecting the dim light in the room. "Something has happened to me," she said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "My genetic code, it's changing. And the only connection I can trace it to is you." Ethan blinked, clearly taken aback. "Me? How is that even possible? We talked, we didn't? I know." Aina interrupted him, her tone insistent. "There's no other explanation. Whatever is happening to me, it started after our encounter." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, his brow furrowed in thought. "Okay, let's start from the beginning. What exactly is happening to you?" Aina explained everything, her altered bior scans, the physical changes she couldn't deny, and the collective's relentless pursuit of her. As she spoke, Ethan listened intently, his expression shifting from confusion to curiosity, and finally to concern. "This is incredible," he said finally, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "But also, I don't know what to make of it." "It's terrifying," Aina said bluntly, her golden eyes reflecting the fear she had tried to suppress. "If your people find out, they will erase me." Ethan stood still, absorbing the gravity of her words. "That's why you came to me?" he asked quietly. "You need answers?" Aina nodded, her face pale but determined. "I don't know what's happening to me. My genetic code, it's changing, and the only connection I can trace is to you. What did we exchange that could have triggered this?" Ethan's mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. "It has to be something about our physiology," he murmured. "Your people are so advanced, so stable. Maybe that stability has made you more susceptible to external influences." He paused, deep in thought. "Humanity is chaotic, adaptable. What if this is a kind of compatibility, something neither of our species ever anticipated?" The idea struck Aina with the force of a revelation. The warmth inside her surged, deepening. It wasn't just her body that was changing, it was her very essence. A connection to Ethan had awakened something dormant within her. But why? Why now? And why her? She trembled slightly as she spoke, her voice uncertain. "Why me, Ethan? Why is this happening now?" Ethan's eyes softened, and he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out together," he said, his voice filled with sincerity that disarmed her. For the first time in days, Aina felt a flicker of hope. But even as she grasped onto it, a deep dread gnawed at her. The collective would never stop searching for her. And when they found her, they would not hesitate to destroy everything, everyone, in their path. Suddenly the moment was shattered. Aina's sharp hearing picked up the unmistakable hum of ZYTH patrol ships. Her pulse quickened and her mind spun into action. They had found her. Ethan's face hardened. "What do we do?" Aina's instincts took over. "We run," she said, grabbing Ethan's arm before he could say another word. Without waiting for a response, she pulled him toward the back of the house. The dense forest ahead offered a fleeting chance at escape. But even as they fled into the darkness, Aina couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much greater than either of them could comprehend. The forest provided momentary concealment, but Aina knew it wouldn't last. ZYTH patrol ships were equipped with thermal scanners that could detect life forms through layers of foliage. She glanced at Ethan, whose breathing was already labored. Humans were resilient, but they lacked the physical stamina of the ZYTH. "Keep moving," she urged him, her tone sharp but not unkind. "We need to get to my ship. It's cloaked, but they'll find it if we take too long." Ethan nodded grimly, his expression reflecting the fear they both shared. "What happens when we get there? Your people won't just let you leave, will they?" "They won't have a choice," Aina said, pushing a low-hanging branch aside as they pressed on through the underbrush. "If we can get far enough away, I can initiate a jump to uncharted space. They'll be less willing to follow me there." Ethan's voice wavered with concern. "And what about me? If they find out a human is involved?" Aina interrupted firmly, her voice unwavering. "I won't let them." The hum of engines grew louder, vibrating the air around them. Ana's heart sank. The patrols were closing in faster than she had hoped. "We don't have much time," she said, grabbing Ethan's hand and pulling him forward. Her golden eyes scanned the forest ahead, looking for any advantage. She spotted a narrow ravine ahead, its walls steep but climbable. "This way," she directed, urging him toward it. As they reached the edge, Ana leapt down effortlessly, landing in a crouch at the bottom. She glanced back to find Ethan hesitating, staring at the drop. "Jump," she called up to him. Ethan took a deep breath, then followed her down, landing awkwardly but unharmed. Ana helped him to his feet and they pressed on. The ravine offered a brief reprieve from the patrols overhead, their search now above them. Moments later, the outline of her ship came into view, sleek and barely visible against the forest shadows. She activated the remote interface on her wrist, and the hatch hissed open. "Get inside," she ordered, ushering Ethan through the hatch. As the hatch sealed behind him, Ana quickly moved to the controls. The ship's systems hummed to life under her fingers. "They'll detect the engine signature once we take off," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "I'll have to overload the cloaking field to buy us time." Ethan gripped the back of the pilot's chair, his expression tight with concern. "Won't that leave us exposed?" "Only for a moment," Ana replied. "Hold on." With a sharp lurch, the ship lifted off the ground, its engines roaring as it broke through the canopy. The patrol ships immediately altered their course, their pursuit relentless. Ana's eyes flicked to the scanners. "3 ships on our tail," she muttered, her brow furrowing. "They're closing in fast." Ethan's voice was tense, laced with anxiety. "Can't this thing go any faster?" Ana smirked despite the dire circumstances. "Humans and their impatience. Watch and learn," she muttered. She pushed the throttle forward, and the ship surged ahead, the stars blurring outside the viewport as they shot into the night. The patrol ships fired upon them, their weapons flaring as they closed the gap. Ana's fingers flew across the controls, her mind working at a frantic pace. The collective would stop at nothing to catch them, but she wouldn't give up. Not now. Not when they were so close to the answers they both needed. The ship shook violently as another burst of energy slammed into its shields. Ana's hands flew over the controls, expertly maneuvering the ship with a precision that defied logic. The ship darted through the oncoming blasts, weaving between them with an agility that should have been impossible. Ethan gripped the seat beside him, his eyes wide with alarm as he watched the endless barrage of energy strikes. "Ana." Ethan's voice rose in panic. "What are we doing? We can't outrun them forever." Ana's golden eyes burned brighter with each passing second, the warmth inside her growing more intense. She wasn't just fighting for survival, she was connected to something much larger than herself now. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm despite the chaos around them, "there's a fail-safe device in the back compartment. If they catch us, you'll need to use it to escape." "What about you?" Ethan demanded, his voice rising. "What will happen to you?" Ana hesitated for a moment, the words difficult to form. She couldn't explain it, couldn't explain how everything about this situation, everything about her, was changing. "I don't know how to explain it," she said, her voice low and tinged with uncertainty. "But it's connected to what's happening to me, to us." Before Ethan could respond, the ship trembled again, and the console lit up in a chaotic display. New symbols and patterns appeared on the screen, symbols Ana didn't recognize but somehow felt strangely familiar. Her fingers hovered over the console, drawn to the patterns, and without fully understanding why, she began to input commands. The ship responded instantly, aligning itself with a distant structure, a low hum vibrating through the cabin as they were pulled inside. As they entered the structure, the walls glowed with the same intricate patterns that had appeared on the console. Ana guided the ship carefully, landing gently on a platform that extended out into the vast empty space beyond. The silence was overwhelming, the only sound the quiet hum of the ship's engines. Ethan stood beside her, his face wary. "Are we really going out there?" he asked, his voice laced with doubt. Ana's gaze was fixed ahead, her expression resolute. "We have to," she said firmly. "This place, this structure, it holds the answers we've been searching for." With a deep breath, Ana and Ethan stepped onto the platform, the air around them thick with energy. Ana felt the warmth in her chest intensify, spreading through her body like wildfire. It was a feeling unlike anything she had ever experienced before, a connection to something deep within the structure, something ancient. The distorted voice they had heard earlier returned, clearer now, though still incomprehensible. But even without understanding the words, Ana felt their meaning in her very bones. "This isn't just about me," she whispered, her voice trembling with the realization that was dawning on her. This is about the origin of everything, of humanity, of my people. Something brought us together for a reason. Ethan turned to her, his eyes wide with awe, matching her own sense of wonder. What reason? Aina met his gaze, her glowing eyes filled with determination. To find out, she said simply. Together. They moved deeper into the structure, their footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The walls seemed to pulse with life, responding to their presence. Ethan trailed behind her, his hand brushing against the smooth, luminous surface of the walls. Each touch caused the walls to flare faintly with light, as if the structure itself was alive. Ethan whispered, his voice awed, Aina, this place, it feels alive. Aina nodded, her senses heightened by the energy that flowed around them. I think it is alive, she said, her voice filled with wonder. Or at least, it's conscious in a way we don't understand. The passageway widened, opening into a vast chamber. At the center stood a towering structure of interwoven light and metal, a spiraling formation that reached upward, vanishing into a haze of energy. At the base of this structure, a pedestal glowed with a soft, inviting light. Ethan stopped in his tracks, his expression uncertain. Are we supposed to approach that? He asked, his voice hesitant. Aina's gaze never wavered as she moved forward, her steps unwavering. I think so, she replied, though her voice faltered as she drew closer to the pedestal. The warmth in her chest flared, burning with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. As she stepped closer, the pedestal's light brightened, and the voice they had been hearing became distinct and clear. Child of two worlds, the voice said, its tone neither male nor female, but a harmonious blend of both. You stand at the nexus of what was and what could be. Aina froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice, this entity, was speaking directly to her. Who are you? She demanded, her voice trembling with both awe and fear. I am the architect, the voice responded. A sentinel of the infinite weave, a construct of the first ones who wove the threads of existence. Ethan stepped forward, his brow furrowed with confusion. The first ones? Are you saying you're responsible for creating life? No, the architect replied, its voice calm and distant. We are not creators but facilitators. The weave binds all living things, connecting their essence across time and space. What you call life is the outcome of its resonance. Aina's breath hitched as understanding began to dawn. The changes in my DNA, the connection I feel to humanity, is this part of the weave? Yes, the architect responded, its voice now resonating with an otherworldly certainty. The weave is not stagnant. It evolves, blending what was once separate to ensure continuity and balance. Your union, though unintended, is the catalyst for a new era. Ethan's jaw tightened as he processed the information. Unintended, he asked. What does that mean? Why her? Why me? The architect paused, its light flickering as if in contemplation. Your encounter activated dormant threads within the weave, it explained. The ZYTH and humanity are not as distinct as you believe. You share a common origin. Aina's mind reeled as the weight of the architect's words sank in. The changes in her, her connection to Ethan, it was all part of something much greater, a cosmic weave that tied their fates together. This was just the beginning. And the answers they sought were only the first step toward understanding a truth neither species could have ever anticipated. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly in all directions, the eerie silence pressing down on them as they drifted further into the unknown. The ship hummed softly, its system struggling to stabilize after the jump. Aina's golden eyes flickered as she ran a series of diagnostics, her mind racing to make sense of their situation. The collective was behind them, but in front of them lay only uncertainty. Whatever had brought them to this point, whatever answers they sought, they would have to find them here, in the vast, uncharted expanse. Ethan, sitting across from her, leaned back in his seat, his expression a mixture of awe and unease. His fingers drummed lightly on the armrest, a reflection of the tension that had yet to dissipate. Aina, he said quietly, his voice filled with a growing concern, are we even anywhere? Aina didn't immediately respond, her fingers dancing over the console as she tried to bring the ship's systems back online. The jump had pushed the engines to their absolute limits, and the vessel's power reserves were dangerously low. She needed to stabilize things, but every second felt like they were sinking deeper into an abyss of uncertainty. We're somewhere, she replied, her tone more confident than she felt. She glanced at the screen, trying to make sense of the fluctuating readings. But I don't know where. The ship's instruments were no help. The scanners were blind, unable to detect anything beyond the hull. Aina let out a low breath, frustration mounting. She ran a series of diagnostics again, her golden eyes narrowing as strange readings appeared on the display. "This is strange," she murmured, her voice tight with unease. "The spatial coordinates are fluctuating. It's as if space itself isn't stable here." Ethan frowned, staring at the viewport, his mind struggling to comprehend the vast nothingness outside. The colors of the void were unlike anything he'd ever seen, shifting and pulsing in hues that defied logic. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. "What is this place?" he asked, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and confusion. Aina's gaze was fixed on the console, her mind racing to piece together what was happening. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice carrying a tinge of wonder. "It's unlike anything I've ever encountered before. Maybe this is why the collective never mapped uncharted space." Before they could process the implications of this new, unfamiliar reality, a sudden tremor shook the ship. Both of them were thrown forward as the vessel lurched violently. Aina's hands flew to the controls, her instincts taking over as she struggled to steady the ship. Ethan gripped the armrest, his eyes wide with alarm. "What was that?" His voice was sharp, edged with panic. "The gravitational field," Aina replied, her tone clipped. "It's changing. Something's pulling us in." She could feel the ship's trajectory shifting, the system struggling to correct itself as an invisible force seemed to draw them closer toward something. Something immense, something powerful. Before they could react further, the ship's scanners flickered back to life, the faintest signal appearing on the display. Aina's fingers moved quickly over the console as she focused on the data that was slowly taking shape. "What is that?" Ethan asked, his voice tense, his gaze fixed on the screen. Aina's eyes narrowed as the outline of the object appeared, its immense size gradually becoming clearer. "It's a structure," she said, her voice hardening. "We're being pulled toward it." The object's form was barely discernible against the vastness of the void, a shadow in the dark, but the more they approached, the more defined it became. It was ancient, beyond ancient, and its surface was covered in intricate, glowing patterns that pulsed in harmony with the shifting hues of the void around them. The patterns weren't just decorations, they seemed to resonate with an energy that Aina could feel deep within her, an energy that made her chest tighten with a mixture of awe and fear. The ship's hull hummed, vibrating gently as they closed in on the anomaly. Aina adjusted the ship's trajectory, steering them toward the structure. As they neared, it became even clearer, vast and imposing, the shape of the structure now unmistakable. It was like nothing she had ever seen before, a blend of technology and something more. The patterns on its surface shifted in ways that defied understanding, their intricate designs seemingly alive, reacting to their presence. Aina's mind raced, trying to process what she was seeing. "This structure," she muttered, her voice filled with a mix of wonder and unease, "it's not just a building. It's something more." She glanced at Ethan, her expression serious. "We need to find out what this is, what it means." Ethan's gaze was fixed on the structure, his face a mixture of awe and trepidation. "But how?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "How do we even begin to understand this?" Aina didn't have an answer, but she felt an undeniable pull toward the structure. The connection between them, the connection to the unknown force that had drawn them here, was growing stronger with every passing second. "We start by getting closer," she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced with the weight of the unknown. As they approached the structure, the ship's systems responded to something in the environment, the energy around them intensifying. The walls of the vessel hummed with a strange resonance, the patterns on the structure seeming to ripple with the ship's movement. The closer they got, the more the void itself seemed to warp around them, as if space was bending to accommodate their arrival. Aina's fingers tightened on the controls as the ship's instruments indicated they were nearing the structure's entrance. "This is it," she said, her voice a whisper of awe. "This is the moment. Whatever happens next, we have to be ready." The ship's hull groaned as they entered the structure's gravitational pull, the patterns on its surface flickering in response to their approach. Ethan glanced at Aina, his gaze steady but filled with questions. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice quieter now as if he knew the gravity of the situation. Aina turned to face him, her golden eyes glowing with a mixture of determination and wonder. "We don't have a choice," she said, her voice resolute. "This is the only way forward." The ship moved closer to the entrance, the structure looming larger by the second. Whatever was waiting for them inside, whatever answers the structure held, it was clear that they had crossed a threshold. There was no turning back now. They were on the precipice of something far greater than themselves, something that would redefine everything they thought they knew about their origins, about the universe, and about the connection between their two species. The ship drifted further into the unknown, the vast expanse of the void stretching endlessly before them. Aina and Ethan sat in silence, the weight of what had just transpired hanging heavily between them. The chamber they had left behind had shifted the very fabric of their existence, binding them together in a way neither of them could fully comprehend. The air was thick with the unspoken realization that their lives, their futures, had been irrevocably altered. As the blue sphere of Earth came into view, Aina's golden eyes scanned the stars, her gaze distant as she pondered the path ahead. Ethan, sensing her internal struggle, broke the stillness with a quiet question. "How do we explain this to our people?" His voice was calm, but there was an underlying tension in the way he spoke, as if he were bracing for the weight of the truth to come crashing down. Aina's expression was unreadable as she met his gaze. "We don't," she replied, her voice steady, yet laced with a quiet resolve. The simplicity of her answer hung in the air, heavy with the knowledge of what revealing the truth could bring. She turned her attention back to the viewport, her golden eyes reflecting the endless stars stretching before them, feeling the pull of the uncharted space they had just traversed. Ethan frowned, the crease between his brows deepening as the gravity of the situation sank in. "Not yet?" he asked, his voice edged with disbelief. "But we've just been given the answers, the very foundation of everything. You and I, our species, this connection. How long can we keep it a secret?" Aina turned to him, her gaze piercing yet calm. "If we reveal everything now without proof, without preparation," she said carefully, choosing her words with precision, "we risk chaos. The collective will see this as a threat. They'll escalate their control. They'll come after us, after everything we've learned. And your people," she paused, her tone softening as she considered his world, "they're still recovering. They've barely begun to heal from their own divisions. They're not ready to hear that they share an origin with a species that's been watching them for centuries." Ethan leaned back in his seat, rubbing his temples in frustration. He had known deep down that the truth would be hard to convey. But the enormity of the task before them was clearer now than ever. "So what's the plan?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of exasperation and resolve. "We just wait for the next cosmic entity to give us instructions?" Aina smirked faintly at his sarcasm, though the gravity of their situation was not lost on her. "No," she said softly, her tone taking on a more measured, deliberate cadence. "We start small. You and I together. We forge alliances. We gather those who are open-minded enough to understand, those who can help us build the bridge between our worlds. But we do it quietly, carefully." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding the wisdom in her words. He could see the weight of responsibility in her eyes, the same weight that had settled on his own shoulders. "Okay," he said, taking a deep breath, "but how do we find these people? How do we even begin to know who to trust with this kind of information?" Aina turned inward, her gaze unfocused as a spark of intuition flickered to life within her. The connection between them, the bond that had been forged in the depths of the structure, was more than just a link between two individuals. It was a conduit, a bridge that connected them to something larger, something ancient. She could feel the weave, that intricate web of existence, pulling at her, guiding her thoughts. It would not abandon them. It had chosen them, and she knew that somehow, it would guide their steps. "The weave won't abandon us," she said quietly, as if the words were an affirmation to herself more than an answer to him. "It brought us together for a reason. We just have to listen, follow the path it's showing us." Ethan studied her with a mixture of awe and concern. He could see the certainty in her eyes, the calm confidence that she had found in herself since the event in the structure. But he also saw the underlying uncertainty, the quiet fear of what they were about to embark on. "So, we trust in this connection?" he asked, the question lingering in the air. Aina nodded, her golden eyes gleaming softly in the dim light of the cockpit. "Yes. We trust in the weave, in the bond we share. It will guide us to those who can help. But we have to be patient, Ethan. We can't rush this. The answers will come, but they need time." Ethan let out a long sigh, leaning back in his chair as he processed her words. He had always been one to act quickly, to dive headfirst into situations with little regard for the consequences. But this was different. This was bigger than anything he had ever faced. He had always thought of the world in terms of what he could see, touch, and understand. But now his reality had been shattered. The future of their species, of all species, was tied to something far greater than any of them had ever realized. "All right," he said after a moment, his voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "We start small. We take it one step at a time." He turned to her, his expression serious but resolute. And we'll figure it out together like we always have. Aina's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. Yes, together, she echoed. There was no other way. As the ship drifted through the endless void, Earth's blue sphere glowing in the distance, Aina and Ethan both knew that this was just the beginning. The future ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges they could scarcely imagine. But one thing was clear, they were no longer just two individuals. They were part of something far larger, a bridge between two worlds, two species, that would shape the future in ways they had yet to understand. And together they would walk that path step by step, guided by the weave and the bond that had united them. Aina's fingers hovered over the console, her eyes narrowing as the distress signal played once again. The faint beeping was soft but persistent, a call for help from an unknown source. Her heart quickened as she leaned forward, her voice filled with surprise and curiosity. It's a distress signal, she murmured, the realization settling in. From a neutral zone between Xur and human space. Ethan leaned closer, his gaze fixed on the screen. Neutral zone? His voice reflected a mixture of concern and confusion. That's uncharted territory, isn't it? Aina nodded, her golden eyes flickering with an unreadable emotion. Technically, yes. It's a place where neither side holds jurisdiction. A space in between where anyone who wants to stay off the radar can go. It's perfect for those who wish to stay hidden, or for those who have nowhere else to turn. Ethan raised an eyebrow, his expression thoughtful. Or people who are desperate enough to ask for help, he added, the words carrying a weight of both possibility and danger. Aina's gaze hardened with determination. This could be our first step. If someone is out there asking for help, they might already be questioning the divisions between our species. We need to answer. We need to show them that there's another way. She adjusted the ship's trajectory, steering toward the coordinates that had been provided. The hum of the engines was the only sound that filled the cockpit, a steady backdrop to their growing anticipation. Each moment brought them closer to something new, something that could change everything. The journey to the coordinates was short, but when they arrived, what they found was nothing short of unsettling. A small vessel drifted aimlessly in the void, its hull scarred and battered, its systems barely functional. The sight of it sent a shiver through Aina's spine, but she steeled herself, focusing on the task at hand. She hailed the ship, her voice firm but welcoming. This is Captain Aina Turan of the ZY vessel Ecliptic Flame. We've received your distress signal. Identify yourself. There was a long pause, and just when Aina began to wonder if the signal had been a trap, the screen flickered to life. A haggard face appeared, the features distinctly human but with a faint metallic sheen to the skin. The figure's eyes glowed faintly, an unnatural light emanating from within. It was a gaze that spoke of something far beyond ordinary humanity, a glimpse into the unknown. My name is Eris, the figure said, their voice weary but defiant, tinged with a sense of urgency. And if you're here to help, you'd better be prepared for what's coming. Ethan leaned closer to the screen, his brow furrowing with concern. What's coming? War, Eris replied, their tone grim. And it's not just between humans and Xur. Something else is out there. Something that doesn't care about the weave or your architect. If we don't stand together, none of us will survive. Aina and Ethan exchanged a glance, their unspoken agreement solidifying between them. This was it. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the beginning of the path the architect had prepared them for. This is it, Aina said softly, her voice carrying a quiet sense of finality. She looked at Ethan, her expression resolute. We've been chosen. This is why we're here. Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. Then let's make sure we're ready. With that, Aina guided the Ecliptic Flame closer to the damaged vessel, extending its docking port to connect with the smaller ship. The two ships locked together with a soft hiss, the faint vibrations reverberating through the hull. Aina and Ethan exchanged one last glance before stepping into the airlock, both of them steeling themselves for whatever lay ahead. Inside the damaged vessel, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The dim lights flickered erratically, casting long shadows on walls scarred by plasma burns. Eris was waiting for them, standing at the threshold of a small chamber. Their metallic skin caught the faint glow of the emergency beacons, and their glowing eyes locked onto Aina and Ethan as they entered. Follow me, Eris said, turning without further explanation. The two exchanged wary glances but followed Eris without hesitation. They were in this together, and they had no choice but to trust the figure who had called them here. Eris led them to a small chamber where holographic displays filled the air with streams of data and fragmented images. One image dominated the center of the display, a swirling mass of darkness, alive with flashes of crimson light, its shape ever-shifting, impossible to fully comprehend. "What is that?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper as he stared at the image, a chill creeping down his spine. Eris turned to face him, their glowing eyes unblinking. "That's what destroyed my colony," they said grimly. "We called it the Abyssal Current. It's a force that consumes everything in its path, ships, stations, planets. It doesn't leave survivors." Aina stepped forward, her analytical mind racing as she processed the information. "A force?" she asked, her voice steady. "You're describing it like it's alive." Eris nodded slowly. "It is," they replied, their voice grim. "At least it acts like it. It moves with purpose. It adapts to counter any resistance. And when it consumes, it doesn't just destroy. It assimilates." Ethan felt a shiver run through him at the word. "Assimilate into what?" Eris hesitated, their expression darkening. "Something worse," they said, their voice dropping to a whisper. "We lost contact with several ships before the colony fell. When they reappeared, they weren't ships anymore. They were extensions of the current. Twisted. Relentless. Unstoppable." Aina's mind raced, piecing together the fragments of information. "You think this abyssal current is a threat to both our species?" Eris nodded solemnly. "It already is. You're here because you followed the weave, right? Then it's already connected you to this fight. You can't ignore it." Ethan glanced at Aina, a mixture of fear and resolve in his eyes. "If this thing is as dangerous as you say, we need more than just the two of us." Aina met his gaze, her expression hardening. "We will need more," she agreed. "But first we have to understand it. We have to face it together. If we don't, there will be no future for either of our species." With that, they both turned toward Eris, ready to face whatever came next, knowing that the challenges ahead would be unlike anything they had ever imagined. They were no longer just two individuals. They were part of something far greater, caught in the threads of destiny that would pull them into a conflict that would define the future of the stars. Aina nodded in agreement, her expression determined, but there was a quiet undercurrent of concern. "Convincing the collective and Earth's leadership to work together against a shared threat won't be easy," she said, her voice steady but laced with the weight of the challenge ahead. Eris stepped closer, their glowing eyes fixed on Aina with unwavering intensity. "You don't have time for easy," they said sharply. "The current is spreading. Every second you waste, it grows stronger." Aina straightened, her captain's authority taking over as the situation demanded. "Then we'll start with those who can act now," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "Ethan, we need to contact your people, the ones who understand the stakes. Eris, you'll come with us. Your knowledge is critical." Eris inclined their head, their expression solemn. "If it means stopping the current, I'll do whatever it takes." Back on Earth, Ethan worked tirelessly, calling in every favor, reaching out to the human leaders and scientists who could be counted on to understand the gravity of the situation. He gathered a small but influential group, people whose expertise could turn the tide. Meanwhile, Aina turned to the Zur, reaching out to dissidents who had long questioned the collective's rigid authority. She knew that these individuals, those who were willing to challenge the system, would be key to breaking down the walls that had separated their people for so long. The meeting was scheduled to take place aboard a neutral space station, a rare and delicate moment of cooperation between humans and Zur. The air was thick with tension. Representatives from both sides sat in the same room, but old resentments and years of mistrust festered beneath the surface, threatening to derail what had taken so long to arrange. The fragile truce was already on the brink of collapse. It was a political minefield, and any wrong move could blow it all apart. Ethan stood at the center, his voice unwavering as he addressed the room, trying to keep the situation from unraveling. "We're not here to debate our differences," he said, his tone firm and commanding. "We're here because we face a threat that will destroy us all if we don't act." His words cut through the noise of squabbling delegates, forcing the room to fall into an uneasy silence. Aina stepped forward, her voice just as firm. "The abyssal current doesn't care about our histories or our politics. It will consume us one world at a time. The only way to stop it is together." Her words echoed in the room, challenging the deep-rooted ideologies that had kept their species apart for centuries. Skepticism lingered in the air, but when Eris presented their evidence, a chilling montage of destroyed colonies and assimilated ships, the room fell into a stunned silence. The images of the abyssal current's devastation were undeniable, and they spoke louder than any words could. "What do you propose?" one of the human leaders finally asked, their voice low, apprehensive. Aina stepped forward again, her eyes meeting those of the assembled leaders. "A combined fleet," she said. "We pool our technology, our knowledge, and our people to create a force capable of facing the current. It's the only way. There was a long pause. The room was still, the weight of the decision hanging in the balance. A Xeran scientist spoke up, their voice cautious. If this fails, the collective will hold us all accountable. Ethan nodded grimly. If we don't try, there won't be a collective left to hold anyone accountable. Slowly, grudgingly, the room began to shift. Agreements were made, plans were set in motion, and for the first time in decades, humans and Xur stood side by side, united in their common goal. Months passed and the combined fleet came together, an armada bristling with the best technology and weapons both species had to offer. The unity forged in those long months was a beacon of hope, shining brighter than the darkness that threatened to consume them all. Finally the day arrived. Aina and Ethan stood together on the bridge of the flagship, the ecliptic flame, their bond stronger than ever. As they approached the heart of the abyssal current, the void around them seemed to warp and twist, the stars themselves shifting in its presence. The gravity of the moment settled over them both. This is it, Aina said, her voice steady, but her gaze was filled with resolve. No turning back now. Ethan reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. Together they stood as a symbol of the hope that united their peoples. The battle that followed was unlike anything they had ever faced. The abyssal current fought with terrifying intelligence, its tendrils of darkness overwhelming ships, turning them against their own fleet. The current adapted, twisting and reshaping itself to counter any resistance. But the alliance held strong, their unity a shining beacon of hope in the darkness. Throughout the battle, Aina and Ethan remained together, their hearts and minds working in sync, guiding their ship through the chaos. And in the end it was they who delivered the final blow. Their ship pierced the heart of the abyssal current, activating a weapon powered by the weave itself. The weapon, born from their unique bond, had the power to destabilize the current and bring an end to its devastating path. As the weapon struck, the abyssal current began to disintegrate, its tendrils of darkness fading into nothingness. A wave of energy rippled through the stars, a cleansing force that restored what had been lost. The destruction left in its wake was profound, but in its place, a strange silence settled over the galaxy. It was a silence that spoke of finality, of peace after a long-fought battle. The victory against the abyssal current marked the beginning of a new era. Humans and Xur, united by their shared survival, began to rebuild and forge a future together. Aina and Ethan became symbols of this new alliance, their story a testament to the power of connection and the courage to defy the odds. They stood together on the bridge of their ship, their hands clasped as they gazed out at the stars. "The weave brought us here," Aina said softly, her voice carrying the weight of the journey they had undertaken together. Ethan smiled, his gaze warm as he looked at her. "And it will guide us to whatever's next," he replied. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt like a place of possibility, a place where unity, not division, would shape the destiny of all who called it home. Together, Aina and Ethan had bridged the divide between their peoples, and in doing so, they had created a future where hope and cooperation could flourish among the stars.